introduce your moderator, Andy Langer. On with Fred Golan, Dave Andron, John Avnet, Graham Yost, and Nick Searcy.
I wanted Choo Choo to be here so bad.
It's a sore spot.
So, looking at that, it's clear, I mean, it's always been clear that this is partially a comedy. But when you put it together like that, I mean, there were more laughs than the average hour drama mighta, coulda, shoulda had, right?
Yeah, Elmore Leonard was a very funny writer, and we always hoped that we would do a funny show, but it's interesting, we'll laugh when we read things on the page to ourselves, maybe laugh a little bit when we're shooting it, sometimes in editing, but rarely do you get to see television with an audience. And so it's always fun. It's like, wow, that line actually worked, you know?
Well, we can get this out of the way right now. You were talking in the green room about how you pictured something in a movie theater that you wrote, and it involves Nick here. Tell that story.
You mean the story of
well, the running.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well.
Well, I'll start it.
Okay.
So there was before season 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Nick came. The actors would come into the writers' room, usually sometime in August, and we would talk about what we were thinking for the year. And we told Nick that Art was going to get that incredible episode where he beats the hell out of Frank John Hughes. So that was going to happen, right? That was in the second season, wasn't it?
That was 3.
Nah, it's all a blur. Anyway. So, but you came in and you said what?
Well, I had a knee operation that year. I said, just don't make me run. I said, I don't want to do any running this year.
So the second he left the room, we said, we're going to make him run.
So that's where I came in. The character that was the bad guy was the guy who had the oxygen on the
Emphysema.
Yeah, the little wheelie thing.
And this was
played by
someone that
Scott Wilson.
Yeah, and Nick was chasing him for a long time, so it was like a very personal thing. So anyway, we got out at Aqua Dulce, which is an airport out on the way towards Palmdale. And I went, oh, it's kind of interesting, 2 gimpy guys. You know what I mean? How are we going to do the chase here? And I thought, we're going to do a slow speed chase. So we had Nick wired up there. Did you have a cane?
No, I didn't have a cane, but I had to pick up his oxygen tank.
Right. Yeah.
Because I told him I was going to blow up the oxygen tank if I ran. So he left it behind, so I'm dragging the oxygen tank.
With his gun in his hand, and he's limping on the bad knee. And anyway, it became well known within the writers' room, I think, as a slow speed chase.
Slow speed chase, yeah.
And which I thought was really quite funny. And what Graham says is a very big deal, actually, for directing and I think for writing too in television, and particularly with Justified, because it's so much of a tonal balance. When I do a film, I put it in front of an audience, you laugh or you don't laugh. And if you don't laugh, I got a problem. And if you do laugh, good, and you move on to the next thing. We never get a response, in a big room that has anything theatrical, except when, we have a screening beginning of the year, end of the year. So it is one of those kind of odd things where you don't exactly know, how an audience is reacting, and you're watching it alone or with family or however you're watching it. So it's a slightly different feeling, which I always refer to as the void. You make it and it goes into the void. So it is fun when you see this stuff and you say, oh. Yeah.
And we can't help ourselves, so we're looking at each other. So Dave wrote the line where Gutterson is saying, so is that we want to short bus him, we want to flapjack him, is any of that real? No, I'm just making it up. And we always thought that was hilarious, but again, we've never seen it with an audience.
But I guess there's a tone that runs through the show, and I mean, great magazines have tones, authors have a tone that works through a bunch of different books. I mean, there is a tone to Justified. And so that season 1, that kind of comedy works, and you're pretty safe betting they're going to laugh in the next season, right? I mean, because there's a tone.
Yeah, and I think, if you see Out of Sight or you see Get Shorty or Jackie Brown, there's just stuff to laugh at. And, the actors we hired were all, except for one exception, really good at comedy.
The same with the writers.
To take it back to the beginning for a minute, you did share with, I guess, the writers these "What Would Elmore Do" bracelets, and well, you're wearing one.
Yeah, I can't take it off. I don't know. It doesn't. Anyway.
How'd you do now that it's over?
I think we did pretty well. I think that, Elmore liked the show, and that was fantastic. He was pretty clear. It was fun to talk to him about, adaptations that he didn't like. That had come up in conversation. He had a great story about seeing The Big Bounce, the first version with Ryan O'Neal, and being in a movie theater. Remember that? He sits down behind a couple, and 10 minutes in, the wife looks at the husband and goes, and they got up, and he got up and left with them. And then he always said he always called that the second worst movie ever made because there had to have been something worse. And then he saw the more recent version of The Big Bounce and said, that's it. So, but he liked the show, and he was, we couldn't, obviously he had passed away, so we couldn't check in with him the last 2 seasons, but the closest we had was Greg Sutter, who was his researcher for 30 years and dear friend, and he felt that we stuck the ending and stuck the landing, and that we ended it the way that Elmore might have, or at least that he would have been happy with it. I don't know if he would have ended it exactly that way. We can't tell, but overall, I think we were probably 70-80% in the Elmore world.
Was there trepidation early on because he didn't like so much of what had come from his books, and then you're working with a guy who might be a pain in the ass?
No, because his whole thing of working with filmmakers was just to let them do what they're going to do. He never gave notes, never weighed in. But I think 2 things. I think we felt right from the beginning we had a great cast, and Michael Dinner directed the pilot and did a great job. And my adaptation of the novella was very, very faithful to the novella. So we felt that we were on pretty solid ground with him, except for the hat. Right? He didn't like Raylan's hat. It took him a while, and that was our final nod to him. Is that the hat that Raylan ends up wearing in the final run of the final episode is closer to what Elmore had envisioned for Raylan in the beginning.
But I remember when you took him into the editing room on one of the early episodes. I think it was when Raylan and Walt, when they were getting out of prison, and he was really complimentary, and I had none of the antecedents of the conversations leading up to it. He was really complimentary. He literally said it was better than he imagined it. Right. So
yeah, and there was a scene between Winona and Ava that he saw from the first season, saw it in the editing room. He loved that. And then the other thing he said to us in the writers' room was about Boyd, and we kept this as almost like we could have put it on a card, on a poster on the wall, which is, I don't believe a word he says, but I love hearing him say it. But honestly, a big part of if we came close to Elmore was because of we had the great cast, and then it was the writers. And the first person hired was Fred. And Dave wasn't available the first season. He was working on Past Life, but he did 2 freelance for us. And Dave's first episode turns out to be one of our favorite episodes of the whole run, which was Hatless, when Raylan is suspended for a few days and loses his hat in a bar fight and goes and helps Winona's new husband, Gary, out of a jam. And that's where we met. Well, we had met Wynn Duffy in the previous episode, but he was so big in that one.
5.5-page monologue.
Yeah, and so that was getting Dave, then getting Taylor Elmore, and Fred and I had met Dave and Taylor on a short-lived show called Reigns, and we were just because we were looking for people who could do the hard action and the hard crime stuff and all that high stakes stuff, but also be really funny. Ben, too. Oh, and then Ben was a first time on a show. Ben Cavell and Chris Provenzano had come off of Mad Men, and it's very similar shows, Mad Men and Just. No, sorry.
Nick, I think I saw you earlier when I was looking at some stuff earlier today. You said that you'd never worked on something where the writers were there with you the whole time this involved, and that's different.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in the first season we were on set and we were changing so many lines that they decided we better get some writers down there. But Because you know, we all had kind of ideas, and especially Tim, and you know, and I always had a line or two I wanted to try out or whatever. So by about the 6th or 7th episode, they said, you know, we're gonna come down and help you rewrite our stuff, you know. So, but I think it really, in a lot of ways, I think it's kind of why the dialogue had that sort of crackle to it, is because, you know, everybody was there to make sure that the dialogue flowed the right way, and if it didn't fit a character, fit an actor that well, you know, we were all in and on it together. So, you know.
But that's a chemistry thing. I mean, you've got to have not just chemistry with the cast, but as a production, if you're going to have writers hanging out, right? I mean, it has to be the right group of people
it has to be
for that kind of scenario to work.
And everyone has to agree that we're all headed in the same direction, which was Elmore. So everyone, you know, we were all sort of going, okay, we know we were going to go in that direction. And listen, you know, I would do these postmortems with Mandy Beerley, first at EW and then with Yahoo. And invariably, she would ask me about a line. She said, and you know, whose line was this? And I was like, oh, that was Nick's. You know, like there was a line, and I think it was the pilot episode or something, where Raylan, you know, if you're a kid in kindergarten, what was it?
If you're in kindergarten and you bite somebody the first week, and then the next week you bite somebody else, pretty soon they're going to call you a biter.
The line really worked well in the show. It didn't.
That's a bit of revenge.
And it's not that different than the asshole line. That if you wake up in the morning. Yeah. Is that one of you that wrote that? The asshole?
That was me. Asshole was me. That doesn't sound right.
Well, and you need actors who in the moment can recognize, you know what the scene is doing, and as long as the trajectory of the scene doesn't change, you can play with lines and little stuff all day. But some actors like doing that, and some actors really don't. They get there and you kind of say, do whatever you want to do something else, and they just kind of stare at you. But we were lucky to kind of have actors who in the moment, for the most part, could step up and make it better.
I think that's really crucial, and started with Tim and with Walton, which is, it was demanding, the writing was demanding, and the performance was demanding on a tonal level alone. Because you'll get into a situation, you know, where there's going to be a gunfight. It's the proverbial, there's a, you know, I got a gun, you got a gun, and it's going to happen. And then the entertainment is the playing with it. And that's the way it was written. And the actors, I felt they really, particularly our group, and I think we did quite well with hiring too. I think the casting Cammie did, and what was written was really good. But it was looking for a very specific kind of. It's a tonal exercise, and I think that's what Elmore is, and it's not easy to do. And when it works, you enjoy it. If it doesn't work, it just sinks like lead.
Were there a set of rules? Oh no, go ahead. I don't know if you're on.
I don't think I'm not.
Do you want to share with me?
Sure. Are we on? Yeah. You know, I think it's true. The writers, the cast, and the directors all need to get that tone and to be able to handle the drama as well as the comedy. And tonally, I think it'd be nice to talk a little bit about, go back to the beginning, when we really had discussions in the early weeks of the show about, you know, what does it mean to be Elmore? What does it mean to try to write in Elmore's voice? And you actually gave us homework.
Yeah, we went out and, well, when I say we, it was assistants running around, but bought every copy of Elmore books available near the studio. And we handed them out, and people started reading them. And that was incredibly helpful. And Fred, tell your Elmore story.
My Elmore story?
Yeah, about
my
writing.
Conversation with Elmore. Well, we had the honor and the fun of meeting and hanging out with Elmore on a few occasions. And on one trip, and when I sat down to write my first scenes for the show, I went back through Elmore. I read a lot of Elmore, and I read a lot of all the material that had been written on those characters up to that point to sort of ramp myself into it. And I was telling Elmore this when I was talking to him, and he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "Yeah, you know, every time I start a book, I go back and read some couple of my other ones." He said, to try to get that voice back in my head. And I realized it was a thing for Elmore as well.
Were there rules where, I mean, you don't want to have a gunfight every episode, although there was at least the threat of a gunfight every episode. But I mean, do you, as a writer, is there
showdown.
Yeah, John Landgraf at FX said that he wanted a show in the first season. Our marching orders, we wanted a showdown in every episode, but it didn't necessarily have to be Raylan shooting someone. It could be some other kind of conflict. We always talked about there was a scene at the end of I think the 5th episode in season 2 when Raylan is trying to help little Loretta McCready, and he gives her a cell phone so that she can call him if she ever needs help. And getting her to agree to take the phone was the showdown. Working with going up against a surly teenager was like one of the most difficult battles for Raylan. But listen, Elmore had rules. Never make it about more than the amount of money that can fit in the suitcase. And we'd break that occasionally. In the final episode, it's 2 big duffel bags, and that became part of the story. And that became part of the problem. They were hauling around too much weight. They couldn't move fast. I'm trying to think of any other sort of rules. We did sort of say in the second season, let's not have Raylan kill so many people, and it's getting to be problematic. And so,
because you see him as a straight-up hero, right? I mean, and you'd be, if he kills too many people, that's harder to believe.
Yeah, I not a perfectly straight-up hero, but he certainly sees himself that way, and doesn't understand to a degree what all the fuss is about. But that goes back to the pilot when Matt Craven's character says, you realize it's not 100 years ago. You can't just do what you're doing. But he, to me, Raylan was a good guy. He was a white hat, He was mostly good who did some bad things. And Boyd, in reality, as much as people loved him, he was a bad guy. Every panel I do, I have to say, no, Boyd was a bad guy.
He killed Dewey Crow.
Yeah.
But that gray where you've got to convince them that he was a bad guy, that means you did your job, right? Because you left enough gray there.
Yeah, and listen, Elmore had various gradations of bad guys. There were the bad guys who you just couldn't wait to see killed because they were so horrible. And there are other ones that's like, I want to see him make it to the end of the book, and maybe another book, But, and we felt Boyd was one of those.
When did you know it was over? That this was going to be the last season, etc. How does that come down? What's the backstory there?
Nick's demands were just so onerous that it was. Now, it was a conversation at the end of season 4, and FX and Sony were wondering if we could do what we could do in season 5 is let's shoot 20 or 22 episodes, divide that into 2 shorter seasons, and then finish up with a final run of 13. And we kind of, realized that, it would have killed the writer's room. We would have gone essentially nonstop for 2 years, and that would have been just a brutality. We just wouldn't have had a life in it. But more important than that,
So you were lazy.
We were lazy. Yeah, and because other shows, they do 22 every year, and it's just like, oh my God. And then they're the British who are like, oh, we're doing 6. And it's like, fuck off. But really, it was story.
Well, they did. At the end of season 3, I remember they approached us and they said, at the end of season 3, they did say, listen, 4, 5, and 6 at this point seem like a no-brainer. And we took that to heart. Like, it seemed like when we were thinking about those last 3, we really kind of tried to look ahead as much as possible and try to figure it out towards that end. And thinking about the last 2 at that point, we also couldn't come up with a good midpoint to do 22. It was like, if we do 22 and split up, what's our big 11-episode moment? Because we had that kind of last season in mind to some extent. Yeah,
we talked about it. It's like, what can we'd almost have to send Boyd to the moon for 10 episodes. Because the real hard part was just keeping Boyd and Raylan at all believable. Why doesn't he just shoot him? Why doesn't he finally arrest him? So it was parceling that out. It felt like we were going to run out of story, and that 6 seemed right.
Well, but that's a whole different problem than, that's a luxury as opposed to we could be canceled tomorrow.
Yes.
And did it ever feel like that? Despite the fact that you didn't have huge numbers,
you're very, very delicate in how you said that.
But you didn't
very
feel
diplomatic.
you didn't feel like you were going to be canceled either.
I never read the ratings. I thought we were a huge hit until you just said that. That's fuck.
It's all right. A lot of people like the show.
No,
We
listen.
didn't know it was season 1.
No, we didn't know until Fred and I were working. We went over to help the launch of Falling Skies because I knew the DreamWorks guys and it seemed like a fun thing. So Fred and I were working on that when we got the call that there was going to be a season 2. And they made us a cake, or they bought us a cake, the Falling Skies. So that was a big day. After that, I think we felt that watching the numbers, okay, we're not going off a cliff. We're kind of going the same. If that was good enough for another season, then it's probably good to keep going. And Dave's right. Season end of 3, it's like we're going to get to do 6, and that's huge to be able to call your own ending. And the fact that they wanted more was really delightful. You know, they weren't saying, yeah, no, you know what, 5's enough. You know, they said no. You know, we'd like more. So. But we just felt that 6 was right.
But that's got to be huge day to day, right? Because you're not doing things hoping if we do this, more people will watch. Or if we do this, they won't cancel us. I mean, that's got to be a real luxury, right? Not just we think we know when the ending is, but the day to day writing.
Yeah, it is big. You know, it was funny, we'd get the ratings during the final season, and it's, you know, this is good and this is bad. It's like, it doesn't matter. They're not going to pull the plug now. You know, we're just going on, getting the numbers we always got, and you know, and at that point, when you know you're getting the numbers you always got, then you're getting the viewers you've always had, and they like the show. So let's try and do the show that they're going to really enjoy.
Did it never occur to you to tell the actors this? We were sweating it out every year.
And that was the fun part.
Because at the same time, any of you could have been killed at any moment.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, except me. I mean,
No, wait a second. I almost got you.
no, they
got you in the
yeah,
hospital.
they did. But Graham actually called me into his office and said, you know, we're going to shoot you, but you're not going to die, okay? Because he knew what I would do.
But you had friends that died on the show.
I think we killed everybody in Hollywood. That's why they ended the show. We didn't have anybody left to shoot.
We had, when we got Mary Steenburgen to agree to be on the show, which was a great kick, and she agreed to come on and just do the last couple episodes in season 5, and then we said, you'll be in most of season 6. We said, we're not going to tell you when. And Fred had a conversation, and how'd that go, Fred? About what you were going to guarantee her?
Mary and Ted were at the rap party, and I told her, listen, next season, I said, no, we've had great fun with you, but next season we're gonna have you kill somebody at point blank range. I said, I just think we have to do that, you know, for the character. And she was excited about it, and I told Graham, I made Mary a promise, she's gonna get to kill somebody at point blank range. And we've finally
She gave her 2.
Was that in your episode? Yeah.
Yeah, Seabass.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You want to say anything about that? No, just, you know, she was when it finally happened, the purse thing was what we kind of came up with for the first initial shot. And she was very excited about getting to shoot someone through a purse, as I think anybody would be, frankly. And then we made sure that after she wounded him, she got to come up point blank and get her headshot. And then I was like, I don't want to hear another word for you for the rest of the series.
And then John got to direct her exit scene, which, you know, I got to say, it's one of those, there's been a few scenes on Justified, but that's one. Fred and I saw that in the editing room. Another one was Margot Martindale, when she poisoned Walt McCready in the first episode of season 2. Adam Arkin directed that, and he dragged Fred and me and Sarah up to the editing room to watch. He said, I got to show you something. And we went, oh my God, we've got a season. But when John did the end of Catherine and the end of poor Michael, Fred and I looked at each other, and it was like, am I crazy? Is that like the best thing I've, you know, and the only thing better than that now is Mad Max Fury Road. But anyway.
Which cost a lot less than Justified, $200 million. But I've known Mary for a long time, and she's a wonderful actress, and it was really fun to have her. And she came up to me when we were getting ready to do the scene, and she said, you know, I've never died in a movie. And I said, well, we're going to kill you really well. So you may have saved it for the last second there. And by the way, in terms of tonal stuff and the writing there, I mean, first of all, I just thought it was so incredible what they came up with from Mikey, because he was such a he's there, but he's not anybody. And when the turn started, it was just, so surprising. And again, this is what I'm talking about tone, and that's also why it's hard to do 22 of these, because they're really hand-tailored in terms of the writing, in my opinion. And there was a moment in that where it felt like it could be funny because, you got the cockroach there who's never going to die, right?
Win Duffy.
Win Duffy, is the only thing that's going to be here after everything isn't. And there were moments there where you couldn't tell where it was going to go. And there was also one moment, and I remember telling Mary this in terms of performance, when she's talking about code, and I said, I want this to be a stone cold killer. This is not teasing. This is just letting it go, because there's also the motivation for Michael to hear her code and then intervene. And again, it's a little surprising, and it's a very subtle shift, but it's a very powerful thing. And I think that's at its essence some of the best drama in it. And then what happened was, it was fun. But even during the shooting, I said to Jerry Burns, I said, the key, I think, for me in the sequence is your reactions, because it allows this really violent scene to have a kind of counterpoint, which is this character. And it's a very interesting balance, and that's what I mean by tonal poems.
We could really do a highlight reel of just Jerry Burns reacting to horrible violence.
Graham, you made a passing reference to Mags, and they almost gave you a standing ovation just for saying her name.
Here's the thing. Fred and Dave and a group of us went down to Harlan to show the final episode, and Fred and I have been afraid to go back to Harlan since we killed off Mags. They loved her down there. Yeah.
I mean, did you almost, villain-wise, peak too soon with Mags?
Well, it was maybe. I mean, we didn't listen. I happen to love Neil McDonough's Quarrels, and I loved mixing it up in the 4th season and going for a mystery. And I think Nikki Augustine, Mike O'Malley stepped in. It was because he had a couple of great scenes, and Rappaport. Some people weren't in love with season 5, but I ignore them. And so it's all a mixed bag. I'll tell you this: we never tried to do that again. We felt that, okay, we're never going to have a criminal matriarch like that. We'll have, women in crime, but we're never going to do that again. The hardest decision was that we would have her die. And the feeling was that if she came back, we didn't know what real estate we would have to give up to her and where we could go further in that story. And that would have been a tragedy, is bring that character back and not really have her do anything.
The decision to essentially keep everyone alive. I mean, is that the hardest part of the last season? Or is that you knew that was the way it was headed 3 seasons ago?
Well, it's been a topic of discussion since season 1.
Okay.
Which one of these guys would end up alive? And I know my gut instinct from early on was that in some way, for my own sentimental reasons anyway, I wanted to see both these guys ride off into their own respective sunsets. But everything was up for grabs.
Till what point?
Well, the final call was Graham's.
Yeah, I mean,
till
but
the last minute, really.
Well, I mean, we talked about it a lot. It was really, I mean, Nick alluded to this. I mean, Tim had a huge amount of input on this show. He was a producer, an executive producer by the end, and much to our chagrin sometimes, I'll be honest, but a lot of time, because it's just, God, it's another round of notes that we have to deal with. But he came up with a lot of brilliant stuff, and we could go through it episode by episode, line by line. But it really came down to, who's on the poster there? It's Tim. His name's above the title, and he is Raylan. And so the decision about to keep them all alive was sort of individual and also sort of a group thing. One, individually, we would talk about killing off Raylan, usually after Tim gave us notes. And yeah, I know. And
Slow pitch.
And then we honestly we talked about Ava dying, but that just felt kind of, that's not Elmore Leonard. The women usually get away, and sometimes with the money. So the question became Boyd, and we felt that Boyd, just killing Dewey alone, had done stuff that warranted him dying. But then if Raylan did that, then what was the point of the entire series? That he had learned nothing. He had grown not a bit. And we also felt that him having a kid had changed him. That had changed him a little bit. And so we felt that even though he was, pun intended, justified, he wouldn't do it. And so it was like, oh, and I guess Boyd lives too.
It weirdly ended up being unexpected because I think everybody thought somebody in a show that had gotten rid of so many people that somebody was going to die, and it ended up playing as this kind of surprise. And I didn't realize this until after it aired and we watched it down in Harlan. And I never watched Sons of Anarchy, and spoiler alert, cover your ears if you plan on watching it. But apparently, like by the end, everybody's kind of dead, and people came up to us after the screening and were like, "I'm so glad you didn't do that." They were so mad at the show for taking away these people they had come to kind of love. And I think our finale may have been received in the manner that it was because people got to see these characters stay alive and stay out there in the world, which not only felt true to Elmore, but it just made people happy, which was something I don't know if we'd ever really talked about in the room or kind of had dawned on us.
Well, we talked about it in terms of the tone, that we're not a downer show. You know, we didn't have bleak, horrible. I mean, there was some hard stuff and all of that. Okay. Anyway, no, I mean, you know, like the end of season 4 when Raylan tells Winona that Arlo shot a guy an officer in a hat because he was afraid he was going to hurt Boyd. I mean, that was a pretty emotional moment, and we had moments like that, but. For the most part, as bad as it'd be bittersweet. There's just something, and it's like, man, if we killed them off, that's just sad. And we're not a sad show. We you know, hopefully we're a fun show.
But there is some fear going into that you're going to screw up the ending, and that's what people wind up remembering, right?
Yes.
I mean,
I was on a panel yesterday about the final finale, and you know, one of the things that we discussed is, as much as you want to stick the landing and have a memorable ending and people say this is a great ending for the series, really you're more afraid of it going the other way, so then you have an ending where it kind of tarnishes the memory of the series. I think people have let go of the Seinfeld ending by now, but to a degree you mention it and go, you know, and I mean, at the last episode of David Letterman, there was 2 in the top 10 lists. Julia Louis-Dreyfus came out and Seinfeld came out, and there were jokes about the Seinfeld ending. And so, you know, you don't want to fall into that category more than anything. No, I mean, I love Seinfeld, don't get me wrong. Just not the ending. Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with that.
I mean, how tight was this cast?
Well, they were all tight with each other. I wasn't really close to any of them.
That makes sense. I can see why. No, I mean, you spend a lot of time over a lot of years together.
Well, the funny thing about the cast is, I mean, you know, the Marshalls, we kind of, from the pilot on, Tim and Eric and I really bonded, and we had a lot of fun. But a lot of the other guys I knew from before anyway. I'd worked with Joel before. I hadn't worked with Tim, but he'd been on Deadwood, and all of my friends were on Deadwood. I don't know why I wasn't, but
I know.
I think I was doing Rodney then. But and Walton, we had mutual friends. So you know, we did sort of have this feeling that we kind of all knew each other already. So.
And ultimately, I mean, I guess you said there was the extra interaction with the writers. I mean, it winds up though, I guess. I don't know. It feels more like, for when we were watching that clip reel, they're not all Raylan laughs. They're not all. I mean, you really see what an ensemble it is when you're watching something like that.
Well, also,
I mean, and that's got to be good as an actor to be part of something like that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was sort of. We all enjoyed each other, and you know, we liked cracking jokes with each other, and you know, it was great. Really, there wasn't a. I didn't dislike anybody in the show except for Graham.
well, there's also one thing, you know, that Graham and the writers did so well is they created all these other characters, and that's, you know, one of the things that makes a series work or not work, setting them up and really making them great and getting good actors. So it wasn't just the core group. You know, the core group set a tone and people knew what the show was, and then they came in, and I think that's part of what, from my perspective, where the show excelled. Those secondary characters were very, very memorable. Obviously, Margot, you know, was a high point for sure. But there were a lot of really good characters, and some of them, had small arcs like Danny, and and they were often very funny, and they added to the entertainment of it. And at the same time, you were anticipating a twist, and that's again part of the form. Maybe it starts with Elmore, but I think it was executed very well, which is you weren't sure where it was going to go, and it's very difficult today to do a drama where you can't anticipate where something is going to end.
And I think also we were, all the great guest stars and the people that came on the show, invariably they were like, we love the show, we're so glad to be here. And the writing attracted them, and so by setting the tone, we were able to attract people who got the tone and who fit right in.
Part of the fun of doing the series was, and part of the fun I think of series television is being able to you write a character for one episode, and you like the actor so much, you decide to bring them back, and you find a way to use them again, and they end up developing a storyline of their own. I mean, there's just a sense, there's an organic evolution of a series as you're going along. There's nothing else like that I can think of.
But
Not
then
movies,
you kill Choo Choo. You killed Choo Choo.
And then as it went on, it got easier and easier. I became amazed by the people who were willing to come and play on our show for a couple of episodes. And as the show went on, it had this reputation for being something where an actor could go and have a lot of fun. And we were never going to put exposition in your mouth, and you were going to get to do crazy shit. It was amazing, the people who came out of the woodwork, and it made our jobs a lot easier because those people are so good.
I mean, I don't know if it's because we mentioned Seinfeld, but it just made me think that, there's not a concept to this show like, part of the population all die at a given moment, and now you're dealing with the consequences of that. There's not a part of this show that aliens have arrived.
I pitched that.
Yeah. The setting seems to be that thing. In other words, Kentucky, it's a show about nothing except maybe the setting, right?
Can I speak?
Yeah, Fred, you speak.
Well, when we all came in, we weren't really sure. Now looking back, it seems obvious, but we weren't sure initially what the series was going to be. It felt like it could easily have been more of a procedural with just a very, and I think you described it as potentially a procedural with a really cool hero, and that was one way to go. And about partway into the season, we realized, and everyone in the writers' room were huge fans of The Sopranos and The Wire and all these great, rich, serialized shows. It started to dawn on us that this was a world, Harlan, Eastern Kentucky, this world, these people, we hadn't seen that in television before. It's a world that was unexplored and potentially rich in mythology and history and that we should start mining that. And so that's why about halfway through season 1, you see that stuff start to kick in. And then really, we dug deep in season 2 out of a trip to Harlan, as you talked about.
You'd go down there and send the writers there.
Yeah, a group of us went down between seasons 1 and 2, and then every year after that, and it would vary. Sometimes it was just a couple people, but they would always come back with stories. And the people of Eastern Kentucky and the Marshal Service up in Lexington, and Nick would go visit the Marshals every year.
Charlie on the set.
And we had also Charlie Almanza, our technical advisor, who was in the final episode when Raylan is in Miami, and we've got David Koechner back in, and when Koechner exits the scene, he walks by another Marshal sitting on the desk, and that was Charlie Almanza. But he gave us a lot of stories. So yeah, Fred's right, we just started to mine the terrain.
I don't know if this room is set up for this. I guess it is. Are there microphones? I'm not sure how it works, but I feel like I'm not asking very specific things because I'm just not that guy. Shout
it out.
So if you've got, never seen it.
Great clip reel, Lemon.
No, in all seriousness, if you've got those kind of questions, I think this is the time because it's the finale.
Can you talk about that last line of the series? Because it seemed like
The one that a lot of people couldn't understand and had to watch it 3 times, apparently. I didn't know this.
I didn't know that either. I thought it was a great...
I thought it was a very clear line, and I was very upset.
Yeah, I thought it was a great final line.
That, you know, it was that last run of the episode, I wrote very quickly, and it just kind of flowed, but there was a lot of different input into it, and one of the things was I think it was even, I can't remember who suggested that we have this final scene between Raylan and Boyd, and it was Walton who came up with a different way of getting to it, but he said something about dug coal together, and I just went, yeah, that's got to go in. It's an interesting scene. It's because there's one way to read it, which is that Raylan is lying to him every second of the scene, because Raylan wants Boyd to believe that Ava is in fact dead. So all his camaraderie and friendship and everything is all just a sham, because he's just trying to convince Boyd that she's dead. And I think that's true. But I also think that there's another part of Raylan that does acknowledge that, they dug coal together. So.
Question all the way in the back.
Along those lines of digging coal together, that's the last line of the short story.
Right, and it was the it was the original last line. Well, it's in the pilot.
So my question is, in regard to the beginning of Justified, who was it who first found the short story? Were you reading through Elmore Leonard and found this story? Did he pitch it to you, or?
No. So Sarah Timberman and her producing partner Carl Beverly had a deal at Sony. And Sarah had been at Universal when they did Karen Sisko, and there was just an interest in Elmore. And Carl was reading the book When the Women Come Out to Dance, and he read that story, showed it to Sarah. She said, that'd be a great piece. That'd be a great, thing to option for a series. They talked to Michael Dinner. Then they were looking for a writer, and when they couldn't get Scott Frank, they called me. No, and I had a deal at Sony, so that's how it started. But yeah, the reason we put that line at the very end of the series was because it was at the end of the pilot.
Let's go right in the front here.
Could you describe the process for casting your actors? You have an extraordinarily rich group of people through this series that are just beyond normal television. What was different about the casting process that they had?
Well, it started in, he's tired of hearing this, but when I was reading the short story, when I was reading the novella and I came across the character of Art Mullen, I said that'd be Nick Searcy. And
because I had been emailing you for 15 years going, I thought we were friends.
Nick and I had done Earth to the Moon together. And then I created the part of Tim Gutterson for Jacob Pitts, because I worked with him on the Pacific. And then Tim wasn't available at first, or he wasn't available. He was doing a movie. So we went down some other avenues that... it's in Hollywood, you get in that time and it's that pressure and it's January and you're trying to cast and it's like you talk yourself, no, this could be a comeback thing for Abe Vigoda. This really could. I think that somehow, no, really, no, I know it's weird, but And it was finally Landgraf who just said, why don't we just wait for all of it? And that was, that gave us 6 years. And it was their idea to cast Walton as Boyd, and we had to talk him into it, but it was only, it was kind of like, come on, Walton, you're just going to be in the pilot. You're going to be dead. So, it's no biggie. And he said, I'll help out FX. They were good to me on The Shield. And that, of course, went a little differently. Erica was cast off of we had Cami Patton and Crystal Cargi were just fantastic casting directors. And they just had a deep well of knowledge of all the people who are out there. And they also found Joelle.
And people who looked right for Harlan.
Yeah, people who looked right for Harlan. It didn't have to be a regular Hollywood beauty show,
As we were coming to the end, of the series, Cami was actually saying, "I've really run out of people for your show. I really don't know who else to bring in."
Go ahead, right in the front.
Yeah, there's that famous story from Breaking Bad about Aaron Paul initially not being slotted to make it out of the first season, and then they saw what they had and really built on that. And I'm wondering what characters in Justified you might have had written, but then so you knew you had something on paper, but when you saw them on screen, you said, we need to find more time for this person.
Well, I mean, Jerry Burns, Win Duffy, that guy died on paper like 4 times. We were like, there's no chance. Stewie Crow was another who had died on paper at least once or twice. And then there were people like Abby Miller who played Ellen May, which was just like hooker number 1 in an episode of mine. And then we kind of were watching the cuts and we're like, oh my God, she's really good. And ended up being a huge part of our 4th season. I mean, Johnny Kowalski, who played Mikey, he was just a bodyguard driver guy. And then all of a sudden, years later, I mean, there are a lot of those kinds of stories about actors.
I hired him and I killed him.
That's right. Yeah, our basic rule in Justified is if you didn't see the guy actually zipped up in a body bag, then we can bring him back.
Let's go with you right there in the bluish. Yeah.
So one of my favorite showdowns is the one with the ice pick.
Uh,
And I was kind of curious to see how that kind of came about, because that is just such an inventive way to have a showdown.
so Tim's not here, right? So that was our idea. Anyway, thanks. Moving on. Fred and I wrote that episode, and we had, I think our original solution was that Raylan just pulls early, that they're doing the countdown, and Raylan just...
That's what you wrote the first draft, yeah.
He was counting down, and Raylan just grabbed it, grabbed it 3 and shot him.
Which is not bad.
It's not bad. But Tim had this idea, and he actually worked it out with a friend at his kitchen table. He got a towel and he put it down.
Over a weekend.
Over a weekend, put a banana down and found... What they found out on the set is that it's like the old trick of, pulling out the tablecloth and everything staying put. The gun wouldn't move. You'd pull it and the gun would just stay where it was. It weighed too much. So they had to Velcro it to the tablecloth to get it to come to him. But, yeah. But that's the thing where, someone comes up with a note or an idea and we all look at each other and go, that's awesome. Let's do that. So it really was ours.
Showdowns too.
Yeah.
Right in the front.
Since so many good characters did not die, is there any chance there will be a movie?
We'll see how the Entourage movie does this weekend. And then we'll let you know.
But in all seriousness, things are less definitive than they've ever been, right? I mean, in this business, because there is movies and Netflix and all these different ways that people can now revive things.
Yeah,
Do you
and
think
some
about
of
that?
Some of those are good. But I mean, some honestly just haven't worked. And for one Better Call Saul, there are 20 things that just didn't work. And so as much as Art in Florida solving crimes and riding around on his boat called Raylan, because like the namesake, this boat's a pain in the ass, but he solves crimes. That was actually... That's not mine. There was a whole series of these pitched online. All I do is win for Win Duffy, and then stuff. For all of that, it's just boy, that's tough. And in terms of Dave summed it up. There really has to be an appetite. And everyone has to want to do it.
There was a line I used in Fried Green Tomatoes. Never say never again.
Yeah.
My demands won't change, though.
There was a woman all the way in the back that's tried a couple times. There you are.
So I apologize, I missed the clips in the beginning, I was late, but my favorite line in the history of television is, I've been called a lot of things, but inarticulate ain't one of them. So, it seems like that was right to come through because that was Boyd's character the whole way through, so how did you decide to do it then and what brought that on?
I can't even remember who wrote that line or if that was Walton. Walton would give us notes too, and a lot of it was just simple line changes to sort of Boyd it up a little bit if he felt we were missing it. But he contributed a lot. Listen, this is the thing. They were all really fun characters to write, all of them. And some you could go a little crazy on, and we'd have to, pull each other back from the precipice of getting just too flowery with Boyd, But boy, it was a joy.
Can I ask you a question, Graham?
Yes.
How would you sum up what the show's about?
I think it's about 6 seasons. Well, I think that I think it's summed up in that main title theme song that we just stumbled upon. He's trying to go home. He doesn't want to go home, but he's got to, and he's got to face his past and deal with it somehow. And it is Raylan's story. I think everyone has their own story, and I think that it's not a simple one thing. I think the other thing is that the whole series was ultimately about saving Ava Crowder.
Which is probably not the conclusion that a lot of people came to. which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that she says when she says in their first scene together in the pilot, when I saw you at the door, I knew everything was going to be okay. And so that was the promise. And he also says to her on the bridge at the end of season 5, she says, I'm scared, and he says, you'll be fine.
And you have her back at the door at the last episode.
Yeah.
Which is not coincidence.
No, it's not coincidence.
We'll probably have one or two more. Go ahead, right in the second row there.
Oh, I just need to know if Constable Bob made it.
Again. Well, Dave. There are a couple things where we were like cold sweating it, like, oh shit, we forgot to say whether he was alive or dead. Well,
yes,
he makes it, and Bob is doing fine. What was his pitch for a show?
He is fine.
Oh, there was a picture of him with Joelle when one of my favorite scenes is when he captures her by the car when she's come down the mountain, and he's leading her away, and he says, and if you try to seduce me, just know it's been tried. But the great thing about Patton, just amazing, is that he just played it dead straight. He was Bob. And they got a picture of Joelle doing a glamour shot on the hood of the car with Patton standing there, and his pitch for the show was Hottie and the Pudge.
Up right here in the front.
I always want to know about Raylan always seemed to be grabbing an ice cream cone.
Yeah, that's an Elmore thing. That was a thing in the Elmore books, that Raylan loved ice cream, and so we always would try and return to that.
And then at the last episode, he's taking his little girl to get ice cream.
Yeah, we had an ice cream truck behind them, and remember when we were rehearsal? No, it was in post, and they put in like this loud sort of Cuban cantina song going on. I was like, what the fuck? We're gonna say that they're in Miami. We don't need to have Cuban music playing. We were so mean to the poor Polivka that day. Actually, yeah, the ice cream played a big part in the early stories of Raylan. He lets Harry Arno get away from him for the second time because he goes to get an ice cream cone. And Raylan says, you're not going to try and run away from me, right? And he says, oh, of course not, and he does. And Raylan was a bit more of a, he wasn't the best marshal in Elmore's early stories with him.
All right, one more. Oh, I see over there.
A lot of discussion about Sam Elliott's mustache. Was that required, or did he just show up with that?
We made the decision late, and we had to remove it in post. No, he told me. He said, "I don't have the mustache right now. Do you want me to grow it? It takes about what was it, 3 weeks or something like that to get the full thing, which he has back now." And we didn't talk about it that long.
We just basically said, let's go with it.
Let's just go with it. It'll be different.
Yeah.
It would be less, on the other hand, it could be cool if it's the avuncular, warm Sam Elliott mustache and he's doing horrible things. But there was something about that, his face looked longer and somehow meaner.
And who's got what next? We'll just end on that. I mean, who's doing what? I mean, each of you.
Let's start with you, Nick.
I'm doing a Hulu miniseries, 11/22/63, based on the Stephen King. And it's very, I play like I'm the boss of the main character, and every once in a while he comes in my office and I go, why did you do that?
I'm working on a few things. I generally don't talk about them too much because I feel like in Hollywood nothing is real until the cameras are rolling. Yeah, I've got my deal at Sony runs another year, so the wolf is not yet at the door.
I'm doing a movie, and I just cast the role, and hopefully I'll be shooting in November.
Yeah, I mean, Graham's statement about cameras rolling notwithstanding, writing a pilot for Cinemax and have signed on to run, FX just greenlit a pilot by John Singleton that's 1981 Los Angeles, crack cocaine, starting to come into the country, so I've signed on to kind of help shepherd that show because he has not worked in television, so I'm going to try to see if we can replicate some of that FX magic.
And I just had a pilot project blow up, so I'm I'm sending a daughter off to college and writing a spec pilot.
All right. You want the final word, or? I mean,
hey, the great thing, if I let my mind wander back, at the risk of being sentimental, I do come back. We dug coal together.
There it is. Justified.